I see we're starting off the show strong by talking about wrong comment. Talking about the gulag,
Right?
which is very funny because it was actually you, Angry, who came up with this idea for this episode. So today's episode is going to be on, as the title suggests, censorship under fascism.
Today's episode brought to you by Angry Mongol.
Sponsored by Angry Mongol. He actually has a lot of money. So we want to talk about today what is censorship? Is censorship as a concept, inherently good or bad? As Nico just said before the podcast started, it's dialectical. Censorship that's occurring in the United States now, censorship in the Soviet Union, and censorship in particularly under Nazi Germany. So I think we're just going to go ahead and get into this, but let's check out the comments as we always do. Yes, indeed, New England communists, it's starting. Go look at the drama ACP when you get a chance to. The Midwestern Mark guys quit and are doxing Haas. That's pretty
Hilarious.
funny. I mean, wow, shocked and awed. I can't tell. What?
Really?
No, I can't believe it. No,
They were not, from what I heard, they were not doing well on the Red Note app.
Yeah, I heard they were getting there. Absolutely. And we'll definitely talk about Red Note. We'll talk about what's happening with TikTok. I think this episode will it's going to age interestingly. I can say that because, who knows what's going to happen on Sunday. But I think it would be good to start up with this video that you showed me, Cruz, from Soupy Time. It's got over 1 million views, 1 million likes right now on TikTok. And I think it very much puts a really good cherry on top of everything that's going on. It summarizes everything about what's happening. So I should stop talking in the present. So for those who either find us in the future among the ruins of former America, this is the catalyst. This is what started it all. The banning of all ByteDance apps, including the beloved TikTok, on January 19th. So let me just get this up there on the screen, and I gotta grab some Wawa.
Apps. Fascist countries ban websites. Fascist countries ban apps and websites under the guise of threats to national security, when every other country knows it's about suppressing the free speech of its citizens. If the government believes that a single app could, quote from the hearing on the 10th, skew the perspective of American citizens to be anti-American, maybe the real problem is that American citizens are already in such a state of political unrest and unhappiness that our government is scared a single foreign influence could tip the scale.
And just adding some comments just in case TikTok or YouTube decides, we're all silent and airing somebody else's content. I really do like where she said that, the U.S. citizenry is already at such like a boiling point. They didn't say boiling point, but you get the idea, because we've talked about this so many times over and over again here that like you don't have to be a communist to know that there's something explicitly wrong with society here, that there is something on the horizon, there's something that's leaking over the horizon already, and has been for decades, that's going to change fundamentally everything. And what that is complete and total descent into fascism, civil war, etc.
And I want to add, before you start it again real quick, so like you can tell even before this creator says it, that America's at that point, because this creator in particular is very popular, is not a political commentator in the slightest. I don't think I've ever seen a video by her that even remotely talks about politics. This is a very rare exception to that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's where people that don't even really engage with it are seeing it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
And have it all be over. Don't you think that by taking away the, and I quote, key communications channel of Americans, it's gonna make those 170 million Americans a little more anti-American? Maybe Congress knows and understands that. Maybe the government knows that the backlash it will receive from banning TikTok does not outweigh the threats that come with its existence. Not in a matter of national security, but in a matter of being the most popular news and media outlet that the government cannot control, like American-owned broadcasting networks and publications. Maybe if this was actually a national security concern, the government would be banning all Chinese-developed apps, like Shein and Temu, that collect the exact same amount of data as TikTok. Because maybe it knows TikTok is something special. You can't politically organize on Temu. If TikTok goes dark, the government deliberately and knowingly took away your free speech. Do not accept national security for an answer, ever.
Yeah, I think this is just as, in a lot of ways, just as pervasive as the Patriot Act. So, for some of the comrades who may be a little younger who don't know what happened post 9/11, is that the Patriot Act was a unilateral set of policies and laws passed in order to essentially allow the government, the FBI, the CIA, etc., to spy on American citizens suspected of quote unquote terrorism. And obviously, on the surface, what was being sold to the American people was, we're doing this to prevent another, 9/11. But even critics at the time already could see, just through the language of the bill, of the policies, that essentially it was just carte blanche for the government to be like, oh, we don't like this person, so we're gonna look into them under the guise of terrorism, which is something we talk about a lot on TikTok, and now we might lose the ability to do that. So, okay, why is this happening? So, TikTok, the ban on TikTok basically really picked up when the Israeli, I'm going to use particular words here. This is by no means undermining what is happening, so bear with me. Israeli, and their settlements of Palestine really popped off. All that information, up till right now, was spread mainly through TikTok, Telegram, but mostly TikTok, because for the first time ever, you had people who could literally show in mass the violence that was being brought upon them by a settler colony with American-made weapons, bombs, and airplanes. And it spread literally like wildfire all over the world. Even now, when the Americans try to bomb Yemen, you'll get a TikTok on it within a matter of minutes, and it goes everywhere. And we've seen such a staunch, for the time, a staunch resistance within the United States of people who, again, like you were pointing out, Cruz, who weren't necessarily political, finally being like, like, this is not okay. Like, I've always kind of known that America does bad stuff, but now I'm really seeing it. I'm seeing active, genocide occur. So when this started to happen, the lawmakers in the United States really decided that we have to get rid of this app. We cannot allow our adversaries, quote unquote, brown people, to have control over the means of communication. Now, the other half of it too is that the ByteDance, and therefore, China, Singapore, are they're making a hell of a lot of money from this. The United States wants that monopoly. It's the same, it's quieter rhetoric, but it's the same kind of rhetoric that it comes when Donald Trump is saying they're going to invade Greenland, they're going to invade Mexico, they're going to invade Canada. It's, in fact, again, star of the show today, Angry, pointed out in conversation today, that this is the contradiction of capitalism. It's when it cannot feed itself, so it's going to shoot itself in the foot in order to cut that foot off and eat it, so it can just consume and keep itself going. What do you guys think? I mean, we're all, the TikTok creators.
I mean, I was going to say, like, I feel like if they were really concerned about, like, the security of, like, American data, why is it TikTok? Why is it not Facebook? Like, we already have proof that places like Facebook have literally started wars because of data usage. You know, so if it's a situation, if they're really concerned about our data, like, why aren't they shutting down stores? Stores take our data all the time. Most of the
Right.
things I have to be worried about in real life are the fact that I went shopping at a store and my, credit card information got stolen. Someone has my data because they don't know how to protect it.
Yeah.
It's never going to be about actual data unless they can own it because it's valuable to them. But if they can't own it, then it's bad. And if it can be used to spread awareness, they definitely don't want that.
Right.
So you know how many times I've gotten an email that's just like, hey, one of your passwords was detected as being part of this latest breach that affected 80 million people. And it's like, okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I got another email from a different company. Oh, and here's this email from this company that says that. So if anything, my data has been out, exposed, and sold 10 million times at this point. I don't think they're going to get any additional use out of me other than they're going to keep exchanging the same $20 over and over again.
Right. And again, like Nico was pointing out, it's not concern over data. It's concern about who controls the data. This is literally like cyberpunk ass, like dystopia, Blade Runner esque, like wars, trade wars being fought over the right
corpo
to
wars.
sell you shit, to sell you garbage, to sell ad space. And the American machine will do whatever it can in order to keep that. So I want to look at the language real quick of the bill, real fast. So let me pull it up real fast. Okay, so HR.721 on March 14th, 2024, to protect the national security of the United States from the threat posed by foreign adversaries controlled applications such as TikTok and any successor application or service and other applications or service developed by, provided by ByteDance Ltd. Or an entity under the control of ByteDance Ltd. Section 1, short title. This act may be cited as the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Application Act. Don't get it twisted in any way that the United States is concerned about protecting you, and they never have been. They have always used this language in order to manufacture consent from its citizenry. They said we were going to invade Iraq to stop the WMDs. WMDs never happened. Went to Afghanistan to liberate Afghanistan from the Taliban, so the Taliban wouldn't help Al Qaeda do another 9/11. Now Afghanistan controls, the Taliban controls all of, wow. You know what I'm trying to say. Taliban controls Afghanistan. We got to have troops in South Korea to prevent North Korea from attacking. It's a lie. It's just straight up. None of this is ever true. Prohibition of foreign adversary controlled applications. It shall be unlawful for any entity to distribute, maintain, or update or enable the distribution, maintenance, or updating of a foreign adversary controlled application by carrying out within the land or maritime borders of the United States any of the following. Providing service to distribute, maintain, or update such foreign adversary controlled application. I'm going to skip around a bit. Through which users within the land or maritime borders of the United States may access, maintain, or update. So basically what is happening right now. So just a couple hours ago, the Supreme Court has decided they were going to uphold this decision, that they are going to be totally okay with TikTok being banned. Now, even if that wasn't the case, right, what the government has been doing, it's not mentioned in the actual, well, it might be mentioned in the bill here actually, but the United States has basically counter-offered ByteDance to say, hey, listen, we think TikTok should be for everybody, but it should be under American control. You should sell ByteDance or you should sell TikTok, sell the algorithm to us, and it'll be fine. And basically, ByteDance is saying, well, we're not going to do that. So on midnight on January 19th, we are going to turn our servers off. So even if there even if the ban, let's say, is not enforced, ByteDance itself has put its own deadline of operating within the States. However, the CEO did make an interesting video earlier today, which I'll show you guys. You want to read Angry's comment real quick while I get situated?
Sure. You want to put it up on the screen or no?
There you go.
Okay. So also, fun fact, if the ban happens, the info in those servers here goes back to China anyway. So basically, there was never any NatSec threat.
Exactly. because national security is whatever the concern is whatever the government wants you to feel in that moment. I hate to use this comparison, but like, because George Orwell, just major L, but like, literally, it's the same concept of doublespeak. Like, well, it's a problem now, but it won't be a problem later.
Right.
So, statement from the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, regarding TikTok. This admin, like the rest of the country, has awaited a decision just made by the U.S. Supreme Court on TikTok matter. President Biden's position on TikTok has been clear for months, including since Congress sent a bill to overwhelmingly bipartisan fashion to the president's desk. TikTok, or other ownership that addresses the national security concerns identified by Congress, is developing this law. Given the safer sheer fact of timing, this administration recognizes the actions to implement the law simply must fall to the next admin, which takes office on Monday. Yeah, it's just that language of like, we think that we all want TikTok, but we want it under new management. It's literally like that mega mind meme. It's just
we want to own TikTok.
Right. Now here's the thing. I'm not the biggest fan of TikTok. Well, maybe not TikTok, but if anyone who's watched the podcast for any amount of time has heard me constantly refer to TikTok communists and my own criticisms of the left, or the left that exists on TikTok. And while like that is something that I'm not going to miss, just goobers talking about how Gonzalo was actually good or whatever. People, have brought up to me, and they make very excellent points. Like people like in Gaza, have been able to receive, life-saving help, either with monies or foods, water, medicines, escaping, being able to get to another country. A lot of disabled people make their income from TikTok. Mm-hmm. Again, people have made connections from all over the world. I've met you guys because of TikTok.
Yep.
Right.
Collective started because of TikTok, and now it's being taken away. All because the U.S. wants to maintain its hegemony. But something really ironic has happened. Just in the last couple of days, this app, Red Note. Do you guys want to fill me in? What happened basically?
Go Cruz.
I was like, which one of us? So the app Red Note, Xiaohongshu, I believe is how it's pronounced, is essentially the Chinese version of Instagram specifically. It's not really TikTok, but in the wake of the TikTok ban more or less being confirmed, millions of people in the States said, you know what? I'm going to give my data to China directly. Actually, go fuck yourself. And since we have migrated over there. And the interesting thing is, while they're saying national security, protect the data, the underlying reason the government wants to get rid of this is because the anti-American that Georgie or Soupy Time had said is anti-communism. It's communism that they're afraid of people learning. It's seeing the imperial core spread death around the world, the famines, the disease that's not being controlled, and the general better lives that are being had outside of the United States. So when all of these people, they're like, we want to control the narrative so they don't become communists. Those people have since gone to an app run in a country that has a communist party at its head. And they are talking directly to Chinese people living in these material conditions and seeing firsthand how much better life has been in China, how much cheaper things are in China, and directly being told how great communism is.
Right, exactly. And I've seen, even in our own Discord, the debates about China. We've had our own on here.
Yeah,
whatever.
We have our positions.
But, yeah, but the reality is, regardless of those positions or opinions, like we're seeing, and it's kind of sad it's come down. It's happening the way that it is, but I'm glad we're seeing people for the first time being like, Chinese people are people. Did you know that? Like, it's kind of crazy.
Cool. They're pretty chill.
And it's just wild, because this is something I've talked about previously with you guys, where I'm like, it blows my mind that people hear like this rhetoric about China They dehumanize people, Chinese people. They think that it's just like the land of brainwashing. There's no freedom, no ability to do whatever. It's just, they're just drones, really racist language. And then being like, oh, wow, you know what? Did you know that Chinese people also like brain rot memes? And it's like, yeah, dude, people are just people just because they speak a different language. Nico, what did you type? What is
I just took a 中国同志们好, which is like hello Chinese comrades.
Baller. All right, slay. Look at that.
Yes, Nico.
This live is sponsored by
certified Mandarin, translator.
Yeah.
Well, not too certified. Just saying that.
All right, I got another article here. I wanna read with you guys. Oh no, the paywall's up. Oh no, never mind. No, we're
not
good.
The paywall.
Update: Supreme Court backs law requiring TikTok to be sold or banned. The decision came a week after the justices heard a First Amendment challenge to the law, which it is a violation of your First Amendment, by the way, at the widely popular short-form video platform used by 170 million Americans. The government fears could be influenced by China. Supreme Court has backed the law. Okay, unanimous. Supreme Court on Friday upheld the law that effectively bans the widely popular app TikTok in the U.S., stating on Sunday the rulings ended, at least for now, a legal battle involving national security, free speech, cultural phenomenon that had millions of Americans deliriously swiping their phone screens at any given moment. The ruling, which forces the app to go dark if it remains under Chinese control, could be a death blow to TikTok's American operations. President-elect Donald J. Trump, all right, who is to be inaugurated at the following days, has vowed to save the app, though his mechanisms for doing so remain unclear. Ruling against TikTok, the court acknowledged the wide-ranging cultural impact on the app while siding with the government's concerns that China's roles pose to national security. Now, it's interesting, right? Because if Donald Trump is able to revive ByteDance operating in the United States without having ByteDance be sold to an American company, where does that put Trump in a position of being pro or anti-China, right? And this is the thing with the capitalists. They will always go after the money. They will go for so long until the other option is war. Because Donald Trump has been one of the main antagonists of pushing the concept of war with China since his last presidency. And if he essentially allows ByteDance to continue to operate, it's essentially a cultural win for China. So it's going to be really interesting to see how he spins it. What do you guys think? Do you think he's going to save the app?
I think he's got a few donors, if I'm not mistaken, that have pretty significant shares in ByteDance who are likely going to be pushing him to do so. Whether he commits or not, I don't know. I also heard that the CEO of TikTok is supposed to be at the inauguration.
Yep, I've also heard that.
Interesting. I'm gonna pull up a video real quick, and then I'll swing back to the article. Give me 1 second though, because I have to dig for it. But I want to talk a little bit about when Soupy Time is talking about like this is what fascist countries do. So like, I guess elaborate a little bit more, Cruz, on like the United States and its flavor of fascism and why it needs to keep its hands on all this data, so to say.
Because ultimately, they need to be able to control the narrative. No matter what is happening, in order to control the money, they have to control the narrative. They have to control the working class. If the working class uprises and threatens to take all that stuff from them, capitalism loses. They don't want to risk that. So with our brand of fascism, we're more or less following to a T exactly what happened in Germany in the 30s, what happened in Italy in the 20s. Almost like down to the point of laws are very similar that are getting put up. It's just a matter of time before, it's only a matter of time before we are exactly in that position. And it's only being exacerbated and pushed further and further to that point every day.
But it's funny, right? Because yes, we're getting pushed further and further in that way. The United States doesn't want to lose the game of capitalism, right? So they're willing to just basically do whatever they need to do. But if they return TikTok and the contradictions in the United States get worse, and they will get worse, TikTok will then still be one of the main ways that people around the country are going to see that.
And that's the risk that they're taking, right? And the risk, as you said, comes down to money. How much money do they stand to lose by losing TikTok? Because not only do they lose all that ad revenue, they lose the shops that TikTok provides. A lot of small businesses are going to lose their ability to connect with their clients and customers. And a lot of these mutual connections that have been made, a lot of business has been done on TikTok, and all of them effectively leaves the economy the second the servers go down. So they stand to lose a lot more by kind of making a concession on the narrative aspect for the moment, until they can find other means to replace that funding.
So I got the video of the ByteDance CEO or TikTok
We've
CEO.
been fighting to protect the constitutional right to free speech when the more than 170 million Americans who use our platform every day to connect, create, discover, and achieve their dreams. On behalf of everyone at TikTok and all our users across the country, I want to thank President Trump for his commitment to work with us to find a solution that keeps TikTok available in the United States. This is a strong stand for the First Amendment and against arbitrary censorship. As we've said, TikTok is a place where people can create communities, discover new interests, and express themselves, including over 7 million American businesses who earn a living and gain new customers using our platform. We are grateful and pleased to have the support of a president who truly understands our platform, one who has used TikTok to express his own thoughts and perspectives, connecting with the world and generating more than 6 billion views of his content in the process. To all American users, thank you for making our TikTok community such a rich and vibrant space, for surprising and delighting us every day. Rest assured, we will do everything in our power to ensure our platform thrives as your online home for limitless creativity and discovery, as well as a source of inspiration and joy for years to come. Thank you. More to come.
Yeah, so I don't know. I feel like, I mean, obviously I'm not a business person, but I feel like if ByteDance is already making this decision to turn everything off on Sunday, what are they going to basically ask in return if Donald Trump's administration can basically be like, hey, yeah, we're gonna turn it back on? I don't know. I have no idea. We live in interesting times is all I can say.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that might be interesting to note is the fact that a lot of people don't realize that Facebook data usage was really important for Trump's election the first time around. Cambridge Analytica, stuff like that. Like they took Facebook data. They could even compile Facebook data from people who never use the social media platform and compile basically like a profile on them. So if you have someone who is very aware of the benefits of social media data as president, why wouldn't they try to say something like TikTok if it could be beneficial for them?
Yeah.
He just completely dog walked like Joe Biden and the Democrats. Like, if he saves TikTok, bro, like it's Jover. I mean, like there's just no way. Whatever, man. I just can't. But anyway, funny and jokes aside, yeah, this is what fascist countries do in order to protect themselves. So I wanted us to compare, this situation with basically other examples of how fascist countries have censored people, censored art, censor political speak, but then also talk about how censorship has been used, generally to protect revolutions. Let's put it that way. So Cruz, wherever you want to start. I mean, I got your article, so I don't know if you want me to.
I mean, it's not anything that you necessarily have to bring up because it's sort of just general information of how this went down in the 20s and 30s and in Germany. Most people, especially if you're in the political space, have a general idea of what happened during that time. But a lot of what gets left out is how it started, obviously with a bad economic condition and situation after a pretty brutal war in Europe. But far-right rhetoric started popping up, anti-Semitism and anti-communism, right? And it's that anti-communism that really was sort of the catalyst. There were fights in the street between fascists and communists. People were dying. Shops were being burned. And what they ended up doing was taking political power, right? Those far-right parties start getting into parliament. You start seeing more of politicians associated with those parties. So if we compare it to, say, the United States, there's like the more Trumpian, I guess, Republican versus there's sort of like a split in the Republican Party specifically. And the more Trumpian side allows more of that outright fascist speak, whereas some of the traditional Republicans, maybe they know to keep that on the down low. But as those people start having more influence and start trying to control the narrative, in the United States case, they're trying to ban TikTok. But in 1930s Germany, they were burning books. They were burning libraries. They're burning shops. They're, again, beating up communists. And more specifically, they're burning Marxist texts, any sort of un-German, as they would have said, degenerate text. And Nico, you're going to get into more of the like art and stuff that they were destroying. Until they had enough power and influence to effectively get the party elected. Once they had the party elected, they were able to take on the communists more directly. A bunch of them were arrested, a bunch of them were killed, and the ones that had been elected to the parliament as well were not even allowed to show up, or they would also be arrested. So they could no longer participate in the actual parliament until things took a turn and the fascists burned the Reichstag, blamed the communists, and then passed what they called the Enabling Act, which we could say I thought about the Enabling Act a lot with the TikTok ban law, because for us, we're saying foreign adversaries, their apps, because that's a very loose term. It says we're talking about TikTok, but that can go for any app. That can go for any literature, any films, any sort of artistic expression coming from another market. They could label as a foreign adversary and prevent them from operating in the United States. Again, it's all about controlling the narrative. The Enabling Act basically allowed the chancellor, which I think we all know who the chancellor of Germany was at that time, the ability to bypass Congress, the ability to bypass the president in order to kind of do whatever they want. And with that, they were able to seize control of the nationalized radio system. They were able to control their own Ministry of Propaganda. And from there, once they effectively closed off the market and had complete and utter control over the narrative, they were able to do exactly what they wanted to do. We are at that point where the people that truly want the control of the narrative are actively trying to seize it by closing off the market. And that's where we're at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's really such a cliche, but it's true, but it's dialectic even, that history repeats itself. And what that history is this system we've been living under for, our lives and our parents' lives, etc., of capitalism, of monopoly finance, of just consume until you can't consume any longer, and then you lash out, and then you vomit blood, and then you try to put the blood back in your mouth, and then you just poison yourself and you die. I mean, that's what happened with Nazi Germany. That's what happened. That's what's gonna happen in the United States. It's there's no way it won't, and it's funny because in our own circles, we've had conversations with people where they're like, you really think it's going to pop off? And it's like, there's no way it doesn't now.
It's a matter of when, not if.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I went looking for this one video of George Lucas talking about how he wished that he could have filmed in the Soviet Union. And I want to touch on that. So let's, hopefully you guys can hear it.
But I do movies. I love movies. And I know a lot of movies aren't popular. And you can say that going in. One of the reasons I retired is so I could make movies that aren't popular. Because in the world we live in the system we've created for ourselves in terms of the big industry, you cannot lose money. So
exactly, like
the point is that you have to
here, where something like filmmaking, you and I and Cruz have talked about this, where we see it as like an art, something that we want to do because we're passionate about, because we care about it, because we want to either tell a story or a narrative or something like that. You can't do that here. You can't sell a show to Netflix or HBO or whatever if it doesn't make money. You know what I mean? So like, for example, one of the this seems like a departure, but bear with me, gang. So like,
I got a tangent. Well, I got a tangent cooking.
Okay. One of my favorite shows is Smiling Friends, right? And it started with YouTube animators, whatever, got sold to Adult Swim. They made their first season. It's called Classic. They made a second season. And I noticed, I was talking to my brother about this, where I'm like, some of these episodes it's just not hitting. Like, it's weird. Like, the tone is different. The plot is different. Like, it doesn't make sense. They did this weird one about like voting, whatever. And like, it totally could have just been the crew, just that's what they try to do, and I didn't like it. But the vibe that we were getting is probably HBO was like, you got to make certain kind of episodes. You got to make something a little bit more widely appealing, and that's what shuts down, artistic freedom of expression. But what's your tangent?
My tangent was I thought about BoJack Horseman.
Okay.
Specifically because there's a character in it. Her name is Kelsey Jennings, and she's an indie director within the show. And she's constantly talking about stuff where she's like, it's about a girl and she loves jelly beans. That's it. That's the movie. It's not glamorous, but it's real, shit like that. Like, she's passionate about the art, but constantly, multiple times throughout the show, she's like, well, I'm taking this commercial because unfortunately indie art house films don't pay my daughter's private school tuition. Unfortunately, it doesn't pay the rent, stuff like that. Until like late in the show, she's effectively directing a superhero movie because she just cannot make
Marvel
money.
movie.
Actually, just like a Marvel movie, because she physically cannot make enough money following the artistic act, because the people that want to control the narrative, the people with the money, get to say what to do with it. And like, this is what we're going to make, and we're going to do this because it appeals to a wide audience. And it's going to make millions. So that's what we're doing.
Yep. I know for.
Go ahead.
Sorry, my own little tangent. Then we can go. It's a short one. Today, I actually kind of broke down and started crying because I some of y'all know, like yesterday, my favorite director David Lynch passed away. And I was already sad, but then I saw a video today and I was just like, oh my God, like, this is completely correct. It was just, no one else will exist like David Lynch because America is falling into fascism.
Yeah.
We won't be allowed to have new David Lynches.
No, you won't. You won't.
Yeah.
That's why conservatives don't make good movies, because they have a very specific thing that they're trying to do, and it just doesn't work. There's no real artistic drive behind it outside of, I want to make money. Right. And I want to control people.
Forced to make a particular kind of movie. And I used to say this all the time when people, back when Russia was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. And they'd say, oh, but aren't you so glad that you're in America? I said, well, I know a lot of Russian filmmakers. They have a lot more freedom than I have.
Basically.
All they have to do is be careful about criticizing the government. Otherwise, they can do anything they want.
And so what do you have to do?
You have to adhere to a very narrow line of commercialism. And there's only certain, look, when I started in the 70s, it was like this. I could say Russia was like this, but we were like this. You could do a certain kind of movie. And I flaunted that system. I mean, THX, my first film, is definitely not an American film, and I shoved it in sideways. Francis helped me trick the studio.
Right.
They would have never let me make that movie if they knew what I was doing.
Right. So
that's the other thing, is like, you gotta be secretive about what you're doing, because it just makes a weird relationship.
But the way in the film industry in the United States also, like, not only just like blatant censorship, but taking away resources. So we had this discussion last week, Cruz. I don't remember who was there, but we were talking about making films, and we were talking about the DoD, the Department of Defense.
Yeah.
And we were saying that if you make war movies that are supposed to display the United States is, you know, whatever. The trick of the trade is if you want to use intellectual properties for weapons, like AR platforms, Colt, Boeing, whatever. There's so many hundreds of companies. You can't use those legally unless you have the permission of the DoD. And the DoD will let you do that only if you show a certain degree of favoritism towards the American forces or the Western forces. It is always that way. And it's just someone might have like the most artistic film they want to make, such as, let's say, like Come and See, like the American version of it or something like that, but they won't be able to do that because they won't be able to get the basically legal means in order to show, you know, those things that are those weapons and whatever. So like you were saying last week, you know, the alternative is sci-fi, but sci-fi is incredibly expensive to do. So, you know, you don't even just have to blatantly just like stop or censor people. You just have to manipulate them in such a way where the project won't even get off the ground. Now when George is talking about like, oh, well, you know, some liberal might be like, well, you can't censor the government or you can't criticize the government. What is the criticism being made? Because keep in mind, let's look at the history of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union fought a brutal civil war for its liberation. And at the time that George is talking about, it's the 70s. So what, 20s, 30, or so yeah, let's round up to 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 50 years. So there are still going to be people alive in that industry who saw either the tail end of that civil war or World War II, and definitely World War II at that point. So people have fought and died and seen their entire families and villages wiped out in order to save the revolution, in order to save their country. So when there's a film making criticism of the government, it's not so much like criticism all like, oh, I don't like it that they don't pave my street, which they should, but they don't pave my street the right way or whatever. It's you're questioning the validity of a communist socialist revolution, and that you cannot have in a place like the Soviet Union. And I would argue in many ways I totally agree with that, because what are we talking about? We're not just talking about debating about economics and governments. We're talking about the debating of human rights, of humans' ability to not only artistically express themselves, but to survive, to have food, to have housing. And if you question that, I have to question you as an entire person, if you should even be allowed to say anything, because those ideas is what leads into fascism.
Which brings up a good point that I want to get to after, because I want to ask Nico a little bit, because we're hearing about like what the USSR did, like with artists, and in this case specifically filmmaking, and what they were effectively free to do. But if we go back to the opposite, back to Germany for a second, like what did that look like in terms of what they couldn't do?
Oh,
like
yeah.
Full-blown fascism versus a communist state.
Yeah, no. So with the Nazis, it was very much a you were not allowed to make any type of art that did not fit the traditional values of, you know, the Nazi party. To the point that they went through museums and took all the art down that did not fit this standard.
I'm gonna find some of those pictures.
Yeah, no. They ended up actually doing this thing in 1937 in Munich, where they had two concurrent exhibitions. One of them was called the Great German Exhibition, Exposition, and then the other was called the Degenerate Art Exhibition. The Degenerate Art Exhibition was everything they had taken from museums. And what they did is they stripped off the frames, they put slogans over all the artwork. They hung them all clumped up together to kind of make it remind you as you were viewing this stuff that it was trash, that it was gross, that you should not want to find any inspiration within that artwork. And surprisingly, it kind of backfired on them because of the fact that when they were doing these same these art exhibitions at the same time, the Degenerate Art exhibition had over 2 million visitors for like a 6-month period, whereas the Great German Art one had only 600,000. So a very significant difference. But what I think is funny, and like we were talking about this kind of like with TikTok, is the idea that we're seeing people who are supporting the ban of TikTok using TikTok, saying they like TikTok, because some of the most like major generals in the Nazi army were fans of the art that they were supposedly banning. Like, I hate to have to mention him, but Goebbels was a huge fan of expressionism, which is part of modern art. He actually tried to say that there could be a form of German expressionism that would hold traditional German values. But Hitler was like, no, there's no way. Yeah. And then I was like, I think it should be important to note, like, and I feel a little all over the place, but
You're good.
Modernism is really important to note as to why Nazis didn't like it, was because modernism represented this idea of moving away from like traditional values. It's centered around basically a growing alienation, and they were really focused on challenging like convention, morality, and basically seeing a world that was more optimistic. And a lot of modernist art was inherently socially and politically like forward. So this was in like modernist art, especially expressionism, was really prevalent in like the early 1920s, 1910s of Germany. During that point where we had a lot of like communist influence in Germany. And so they knew that this art was getting to the general masses and talking to them, speaking to them in a way that they understood, that, you know, the Nazis couldn't do. And so they had to hide it. They took it, they made it look as bad as possible. And then they did things like they took that same art, just like they're trying to do with TikTok, trying to find a way to sell it or to buy it to make money. The Nazis did the same thing. Almost all the art that they took from that degenerate art exhibition ended up being sold to fund the Nazi party. And if they couldn't sell it, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Finish your line. My fault.
Oh, yeah. No, and if it wasn't sold, they burned it.
Yeah. What I wanted to say real fast was I just want to point out how, so the pictures I was showing on screen, or art pieces that were in this degenerate art show, I just want to point out the repeat of the watermelon motif. And I don't know anything about this painting in particular, but like for those who don't know, those in the future, the symbol of the watermelon really grew on TikTok, because when TikTok began to censor people for making criticism of Israel, of being pro-Palestinian, of being anti-genocide, the watermelon started being used because the emoji of the Palestinian flag, or Palestinian flag colors, or even saying Palestine, was being censored. So people were able to get around with it by I'm sorry, I said emoji, I didn't mean that. Just like the symbolism of Palestine. But the watermelon emoji started being used as a substitute of being like, this is what we're talking about. Like we're pro-Palestine. So again, I don't know anything about this art piece in particular. I don't know if we ever will, but I find it really fascinating how we're in like a repeat of, like, for some reason this bothered fascists enough for them to be like, we cannot show this.
Yeah, I do want to make a quick no, I was gonna make a quick note. I'm so sorry.
It's your podcast. Yeah,
go Nico, go.
I was gonna say, I do want to make a quick note. The piece we are currently looking at was not in the degenerate art exhibition. I can't remember the person's name. I'll have to double check. But they were a modernist artist from Mexico. So, but I still think it's really interesting that you see these like kind of these expressions from literally the 1920s and 1930s, and still being seen today. And still, in the end, like this would be something that would not have been acceptable in Nazi Germany.
Okay, so then I guess I misunderstood what you had said to me earlier, because that's what I was thinking, that these pieces and this one was in that show, but you're saying that this in particular was not accepted.
Yeah. When I sent you the message, the last two ones I sent were ones that were actually in there. But the rest of it was just examples of modernist art, just to kind of give people a better idea.
You still made a good point, Ivan. You still had a nice little,
Well, I appreciate it, gang, but I want to make
the two things.
That I got the facts right, of course. Let's look at some of the comments here, because I've been a little busy. Earliest Soviet cartoon inspired American cartoons like Rugrats and The Simpsons. Yes. Interesting. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest person that was influenced by Soviet animation is Hayao Miyazaki.
Yep.
Studio Ghibli exists because of Soviet animation.
Very nice. Hollywood cinema have whitewashed history so much. Very true. It's so funny that they destroyed art just to turn around and steal art throughout World War II. Exactly. And yeah, totally not crazy 101 is basically saying the same thing. But yeah, we're saying, we're at a precipice now where you never had freedom of expression, first off, but now it's just going to get worse. And I think we've pointed out pretty succinctly that the fork in the road the United States is finding itself in, because it can ban TikTok and piss off 170 million people. It can save TikTok and let Donald Trump save TikTok and basically have Donald Trump dog walk the Democrats for the next 4 years. But then at the same time, when shit starts getting worse and the police start going after more people and more ICE raids start happening and right-wing militias do pogroms, that's all going to be shown on TikTok. So what do you do? And that's why we say these things like revolution, like class struggle, are inevitable, because the capitalists they cannot win. There's no way. It's a dying animal that is thrashing about, and like I said, it will cut off its own leg and eat it to get a little bit more energy, but ultimately it's still going to bleed out.
I think one of the funniest things I've seen from the Red Note app is, Americans interacting with Chinese citizens, and those people just saying, y'all don't need the app. You need a violent revolution. Like, they're just straight up saying, this is what you need. And here's how, and it's like, oh, wow. But there's one other little topic, because we've been alluding to it the whole time, that I personally wanted to bring up. And it kind of relates back to the Soupy Time video, where at the beginning, what she says is fascist countries censor, right? Or fascist countries ban apps. And obviously we're talking about how the United States is doing it. We're talking about, we gave very clear, like, how the Nazis did it, how they destroyed art and how they took political power to do it. But, we're also talking about the USSR. The USSR censored stuff. As George Lucas said, you just have to be a little careful about what you say about the government. And obviously, Ivan, to your point, well, what are you trying to say about the government when they're providing all this stuff? I'm a little worried about you. So censorship is not strictly a fascist trait.
Right.
Communist countries do it too. The difference is what they're censoring. So if you want to add on to that at all.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think this is something also, since I was a kid, I never really understood, growing up here and getting the rhetoric in school about freedom of speech. I would always hear these liberals and these goddamn libertarians say really goofy shit like, I believe in freedom of speech. I think you can say whatever you want. Even if I don't agree, I will die to protect your ability to do so. Fuck that. I'm sorry, but there are a lot of motherfuckers who should not be able to just say whatever they want. And, who am I talking about? The Klan, Nazis, all these fucking, these skinheads, fascists. Like, no, they should not have a platform. I don't agree with that. I think they should be punished for what they say and for what they do. And if you don't think that language can lead to violence, then you are an incredibly privileged position and an incredibly naive person, because you don't see how allowing that to happen and to fester is what breeds the actual attacks, what makes pogroms happen. If you think the Klan can just walk around your city because they're neatly marching in line and they have permits, you don't think those motherfuckers are having conversations in their own homes about what they actually like are gonna do? You know what I mean? Like, come on. No, you should. Those people should not be allowed to say that. I mean, and ironically, yeah, it's interesting because and I don't know enough about German politics to say much more than what I'm about to say, but like in Germany, like it is illegal, to do, World War II Nazi iconography, but now I think it's the AfD is gaining more and more control, and they're essentially Nazis to Electric Boogaloo. So like, that must be a vestige of liberalism.
It's like they are quite literally a spiritual successor to the
right.
And just as I said at the beginning, like part of what the Nazis didn't just like storm the Capitol one day and suddenly take control of everything. A lot of them were elected. The parties took control of certain areas. Yeah. And we're literally seeing that happen again.
Yep.
In Germany.
Yeah, it's pretty cringe. The world is once again careening towards right-wing domination. Well, I guess it was always like that, really. Maybe not for a time, but like inshallah, we will prevail. I think we did it, gang. What do you say?
Any thoughts, Nico?
I mean, I would just like to end this one with, as an artist, telling anybody else out there who's doing art that your art is inherently political. You do have a message when you make something. And even if you don't have TikTok as a platform anymore to show that art, you should still be showing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very nicely put. Some housekeeping, which I should have done in the beginning, but I'm totally a professional and I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if you guys know this, but like we literally just like wandered into the green room and we're like, all right, let's do the show. Like, we're not prepared. But anyway,
we're all in the same place.
We have a new channel. It's called Collective Live. So the lives are going to start migrating when they're done to that second channel. So please go like and subscribe to Collective Live. It's if you go on our channel, scroll down, you'll see Collective Family. You'll see it right there. So if you want to catch the full episode, this will only be up for, let's say, about 24 hours, and then it will migrate to the other channel. So catch it when you can and go and subscribe over there. We're going to be posting highlights, so you get the little, the little treats, the little tidbits on this one. Also, please watch Comrade Ash's Human Nature video. It is doing very well. Try to get it over the 700 mark. But, appreciate you guys for the support on that. Art is political. The self is political. Everything is political. I think that's pretty based way to end it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
All right, gang. I'll catch you all on the flippity. Oh, the thing is not set to auto end. Flop.